Welcome to the Fermynwoods Contemporary Art Podcast, guest curated and presented by Subterra. I am your host and one half of Subterra, Marie-Chantal Hamrock. We invite you to get lost in the unknown as we take a stroll through rich woodlands, dark forests and subterrestrial landscapes. As we navigate these eerie and unfamiliar spaces, we will explore artist talks, discussions, and original commissioned sound art. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. As we continue to delve into our xylophobia season, this episode features the work of Maja Zećo. Maja Zećo is an interdisciplinary artist who creates immersive art through performance, sound art, video, and installation. Born in Sarajevo in Bosnia and resident in Aberdeen, many of her works investigate sonic phenomena through performance art, where she explores her relationship with place and ways in which soundscapes shape our sense of belonging, identity, and locality. In September last year, Maja negotiated the Hazel and Thoroughsale Woods from Corby town centre as Silencer. Silencer is a performance in a sensory impairment soundwalking suit, complete with earplugs and noise-cancelling headphones. Where Maja experienced the environment in complete silence, the suit made the other visible in public while concealing gender, body shape, and voice. At once both a playful intervention and an unexpected encounter, the work has connotations of protective clothing and social distancing that speak to larger fears of walking through woodland spaces. At the heart of this work are two very important questions. Who is listening, and who is performing? Listeners are advised to listen with headphones, as this is a binaural mix. The following episode also features themes that might be triggering for some listeners and contains strong language which may be unsuitable or offensive.
Timmy, let me take a picture. Wait, get me in. You're really prepared for COVID, aren't you? Is it snow? Why are you coming? You're getting annoyed, aren't you? Well, you should have chose that job before coming. Pictures!
Thank you.
Raspberries 2 for 2.
Hello darling, how are you?
2 boxes of raspberries, £2.
Yeah.
English raspberries 2 for £2.
You look so pretty. Corona. What are you supposed to do? He's dead. Oh.
Raspberry 2 for 2.
What the fuck is that? You're like, can I take one more photo? No, do this. Yeah, do this. Yeah, do this. Wait.
Are you actually supposed to be? Okay, so what is she supposed to be?
loving it.
Yeah, you can, but she can't hear you, so you're gonna have to.
I've done it right. Yeah, in the morning. Next time.
Hello. Yeah, she's deaf. Feather. Picking up a feather. Who's it? Where are you going?
nobody's been too unfriendly. Everyone's been like, oh, what's that? And people have been interested.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
And this is a good one as well, I think. There's a couple of classic ones in suburbia. This I like.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so weird. And that dog was what a wonderful dog, a kind dog.
Yeah.
I've got some pictures of him approaching you.
Yeah, I let him approach me.
It's a cam dog.
Ah, nice.
And those wee girls were obsessed with you.
Ah, great.
It's the steel worker. This is a good one. So you'll be on the front page of the Northamptonshire Chronicle once the Queen's funeral is out of the way, I'm sure. Yeah, kids were astonished.
The boys were a bit nasty.
Yeah, they were.
They all wanted to touch me, and I was like, it's getting a bit too much.
There was just one that was a bit nasty. The rest were okay.
I know. But I couldn't tell, I couldn't hear really. I couldn't read the situation properly, so I just moved on, not to encourage them. I don't know why I do that to myself.
But this sort of thing.
Why do I need to walk for the suit that no one understands?
Too weirder than on our own in Corby.
Oh, thank you.
Afternoon.
I've been looking for you. Right here you go. Can I take a photo of you for the private story? Do a little dance. Hello. Wait, they make money off it, or do they just dress up like that?
I'm gonna give him a quiz.
Hey. I'm joking, I wouldn't do that to you.
You look like you're sweating. A little bit hot. Hot.
Clam here. Like what they've got on mental people. I really want to get this. Uh-oh. I'm diving into the woods. I think that's a bar. I was going to say to have a race, but I don't know his limits.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, hello. Oh my God, watch out. That's alright, darling. Right.
It's an art piece.
What are you doing? He's got COVID. Why are you? Have you got COVID? Can I touch you? Have you got COVID?
I'm taking a picture of you. You can't hear.
Oh, could I?
I want a selfie.
The styrofoam man, wait, no, Misha, let me get in. Take one of me and her thingy and send me it. Can you do my picture for me?
Yeah, be real. Oh yeah, be real, bro.
Get that. Wait.
Yes, man.
Oh, let me get a picture.
Oh, let me get that. You've got fingers. Everyone get in. Let me in. Wait.
Big rolls, fresh truck to make an impression. Them guys are relevant, yeah, you can take off.
Hey, thank you.
I'm a slab on my head when I land there.
Thank you. Bye-bye. What are you meant to be? What's meant to be?
She's deaf. She can't hear you. See that stuff?
Yeah.
It's the stuff you get in a recording studio for blanking out sound.
Oh. Quite even that.
Oh, it's full of sponges.
Oh, that's nice. Well,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
I've never actually seen a costume like that before.
It's safe, but it's a question. I can really go faster. I actually had COVID, I went up to the kitchen. Less than a minute. Thank you very much, sir. Sirs, do join me. We're all going to the same place, minus 2. Oh, you can come down.
No, you go to that. No.
Come on in, come on.
Okay.
Come on. -1, -2.
There we are.
I only do one good deed a month to make the most of it.
She can't hear a word you're saying.
Better that way. There we are, -1.
Okay. Thank you
you
very
go.
much.
It's huge, isn't it?
Can you hear me? It's really good. It's kind of similar.
You want an egg? Here.
Thanks so much for taking the time.
Excuse me, are we allowed to come along here? Is that alright? Thank you.
First event Fermynwoods' new programme of xylophobia themed activity. So the word xylophobia means fear of the woods and related phobias, as well as the fear of wooden objects.
Just check out. I have a question. 66 sticks. 66 sticks. Times a ball. And it's 120.
I thought maybe the best place to start would be to hear you describe what your experience was like in Corby doing the performance physically, and also what you had in your mind while you were doing it, and how it differed from the first performance. The first performance was in London, and then the second one was in Aberdeen. And obviously these were pre-COVID performances. So how all of those things changed, and also what was particular to being in Corby for the Xylophobia program.
So yeah, just in terms of timeline, in the beginning of 2018, I did Silencer for the first time in London. I've developed it as a response to an open call from institute based at UL called CRISAP. It's creative research into sound art practice in London. So that is beginning of 2018. And in that iteration, I didn't have microphones hidden in the hood of the suit. And then I've placed it for the first time just after London when I did it in Aberdeen. So that was, I think, March 2018. And then I had a break. So before Corby that year, so last year, I did it in Leicester as well. That was supposed to happen year before, but because of the pandemic, the event was postponed. So it was relatively fresh because only a few months before Corby, I did it in Leicester. But in every place is very different. So I'm just kind of diving into Corby experience. I think I've never had so much interaction with people that I had in Corby. Obviously, in London was very different because Elephant and Castle, where I did it, it's very busy area of London. So, like you can imagine, you can imagine buses, double-decker buses, people on the bikes waving, passers-by. People ask me for directions. It's like from everyone in London, you find me to ask me about directions. So things like that. In Corby, it was locals, and as Corby is, I suppose, medium-sized town. That was really interesting because people responded to it naturally, and especially young people, youth that are spending time in Corby unsupervised. So for the first time, I was surrounded by these young people, and they created a bit of tense moments for me that I needed to respond. So that was really interesting. I think it unlocked something new in the piece, and that didn't happen in Leicester or in previous iterations of the piece. I suppose another thing, and maybe we can go back to that, is different audiences that Silencer managed to engage or encounter in Corby. And this is due to the actual, the way James envisaged the whole event.
Yeah. So the piece that we hear in this recording starts off in the cube. Is that what it's called?
Yes. So the piece starts in the cube and ends in the cube, which is a multi-arts venue, the theatre space, and the main star of the cube was Anas's piece, composed of many thousands of wooden blocks, held only by gravity. So I've changed in a cube, and I started my walk from the cube, and I think that's the part of the walk that you can hear. But also by coming back to the space, so after my walk, I went back to the cube and to the theatre space where the sculpture was knocked down, and the audience was there. And then I went to the backstage to change again. So all of that is in recording, and in between there are different places in Corby from that we kind of pre-planned, but also Silencer was free to improvise and to engage with public statues and different groups of people, depending on how it felt at the moment.
Well, I think so. So I read like parts of your PhD that reference silencer, which was a really interesting insight into the character development and how you kind of embodied that role. I really liked your description of it being a curious character, friendly, that wants to explore the world within its capabilities. It walks slowly and clumsily. And also you emphasize that it's genderless, which is really interesting to hear how people automatically in the piece assume that you're a man.
I learned as soon as I put it on, and as soon as silencer encountered people, I realized that it has its own character, and a lot of people find it very humorous and a very intriguing character to engage. I think it's fluffy texture, the foam that intrigues people. Of course, it's still a bit unsettling for some, but it's kind of this combination of these contrasts. On the other hand, so I had to, in a way, accept that and work with that, and welcome it. So silencer gestures a lot, walks a bit funny, it's a bit clumsy. It gives a lot of high fives. It shows a lot of curiosity about visual environments. So it's interested in monuments. It's interested in reading all kinds of plaques and information and posters and road maps. And it sometimes stops and bus stops and stations and looks at maps and kind of waits with people and kind of wonders why they're getting into these strange devices and these strange buses and vehicles that he fully doesn't understand. So I kind of immerse myself in all of that. And it is because my senses are so messed up, I can do that. I think it would be very difficult for me to do it as my kind of usual self. And it's primarily, of course, I don't hear a lot in silencer. So I wear earplugs and sound deafening headphones or proof headphones. And this blocks majority of sounds. I think if, for instance, if you shout some high frequency sound, so if you come close to me and shout at me, I will hear bits and pieces. But I'm pretty isolated from majority of sounds, so I have to be very careful crossing the streets. I have to pay attention on bike lanes because I don't hear, and obviously it's not my usual state of my senses, and I rely a lot on hearing. So the first thing I've learned is actually how much we rely on listening to just move around in public spaces, and how important hearing is for kind of sense of orientation. So I have to memorize where I'm walking, especially if I'm on my own, the streets, the major sites, and how long this will take me. So it's kind of easier to navigate. On the other hand, I also, at times, I find myself enjoying this new set of senses, or kind of reduced. I call it sensory impairment suit. So it does allow certain tranquility and introspection. So when people are not around, I do find time to just enjoy in hearing less and feeling less, because also majority of my body is covered with these foam panels, so I don't hear wind, I don't feel vibration. The shoes I've made for silencer, they have multiple layers, more layers of foam than actually the rest of my body. So it's almost kind of, it has a bouncy effect, which I exploit in silencer, but also this all kind of provides kind of additional separation from the environment. And I remember, like, it's just sensation of wind on just some parts of my face. It's literally just a few centimeters of my forehead when it blows, and just feeling relief. And this also this is the first piece that I've done that is really climate dependent. So first, I always pray that there is no rain. Bit of snow is fine, but rain is would be a big problem. And of course, in Corby, I was performing in, I think it was September, and it was quite warm. And I think some of the kids are also commenting on that. Oh, you're sweating. So it was very clear that because I'm wearing COVID mask. So that's one addition from the previous iterations of silencer, that now I cover even my face. And then I have goggles. I always had goggles. So, but they can see that I'm steaming up and I'm kind of red around my eyes. And of course, I'm a bit subconscious that, maybe I don't smell really nice and things like that. And I could feel sweat in my gloves. So actually, one thing that was unplanned in this Corby experience is I made a break halfway through. And John, my partner, followed me, and he appears in quite a bit of recordings. So I think having him as in the piece, he acted a bit as an interlocutor between audience and myself at some time. And I was unaware of his intervention or the level of intervention. It's only when listening to, I realized what he did, and that he had also a challenging role, the same as a photographer. So at some point in the recording that you just heard, there's a photographer also explaining, it's like, yes, you can take a photo of her, but she can't hear anything and things like that. So it's actually people like around you, if they follow me and if they're familiar with the piece, they engage in this kind of communication with the public and negotiation with the public, which is also quite interesting, because when I'm in some walks, I was on my own. And I wouldn't, obviously, even if I hear people asking me or kind of almost shouting at me, what is this? I wouldn't say it's an art piece. Silencer doesn't communicate verbally. So it would gesture, it would try to kind of share the curiosity about various objects and about the town in which they found themselves in, but wouldn't explain things. So
yeah, what was so fascinating about it was that some people seemed to understand quite quickly that you couldn't hear anything if they were maybe familiar with the material of, a soundproofing, that white foamy, styrofoamy material. So we often hear people in the piece explaining to others, she can't hear you, and what that did was something really interesting, because it kind of made very clear a kind of void space where we are aware of your lack of ability to hear in that moment. So it actually makes for quite a lonely feeling. When I listened to it, I felt it was quite poignant, because there's this kind of empty space, or knowing that you're just there experiencing it completely alone. In that sense, in other ways, I'm sure it's a very social thing, of course, as silencer.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult, because obviously silencer renders or kind of engages or opens up different experiences, and I can't recreate my experience. Well, maybe if I was better in sound production to some degree, but it's basically, I hear only glimpses of things, and sometimes even my goggles steam up, so I don't see fully. And then it's obviously there's constant overdrive of thinking about situations you're in. There are moments of tranquility and introspection, but on the other hand, I have to think, how will I cross the street? do I see the car coming, or the dog, will it approach me, what it will do to me, or kind of resolving these situations with teenagers, because I knew that something is going on, but I had to kind of find a way to resolve it without speaking with them. I probably, like, listening to the recording, it was not easy, because I realized that they were far more aggressive than maybe I realized. Although I did sense that there is tension in there. So yeah, it's I have very particular experience, but also Silencer renders something very different, and there's a contrast between the two. So often people find me very humorous, and while I'm underneath sweating and thinking of, will I get severely dehydrated or a heat stroke, or how much energy do I have in me?
Yeah.
So it's kind of balancing that side of things, but also trying to enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of going on. And then also being aware visually how Silencer looks like, because and then thinking about documentation and providing maybe opportunity for a few photos here and there, or for people to, because now also, like, for the public, it's so important to take photographs, and I always think what they do with those.
Yeah.
What did they say to their friends and family, or because through photographs or through engagement with through phones, we understand reality now. So people constantly taking these images, but then, like in London, many more people asked me for permission than, let's say, in Corby or Leicester. In Aberdeen, hardly anyone was taking photos openly, because people were far more shy and they were unsure of what's going on. So yeah, it's actually Silencer renders these multiple or varied experiences.
Constantly searching, like, what were the references to? Like, I think there was human tampon, SpongeBob, just like grasping for visual cues to somehow be able to relate this alien thing. Like, what could this possibly be?
Yeah, and for me it was really also really interesting when the kids were like, well, you don't like this, because they were teasing me and they were touching my hood and kind of hitting it. They surrounded me, and then I did step towards them to kind of scare them, and then I moved away. But then they asked, like, oh, you don't like this, why do you do this job? and it's I think it unlocks something interesting about art in public space, and in some cases, a couple of situations when John told them it's an art piece, people just gave up of engaging, and maybe apologized as well. So yeah, I think it just poses questions about generally how we engage with art in public spaces, with performance art, what our expectations around art, and things like that. And then again, as artists, our role is to engage in these discussions or provoke certain questions, but we don't necessarily have to respond. I hope that I expanded some understanding of art with this piece.
Yeah. And there's another element to it, which is, something disruptive. So what you described as something that makes visible the position of the other by absorbing noise, because the material actually absorbs noise. And it makes space then within the acoustic ecology for voices of those who are often pushed to the side. So that's a really interesting subcontext. I was wondering if you could speak a bit about that as well.
Yeah. So in terms of generally the context, this piece came towards the end of my PhD, and most of my pieces explored the ways we experience soundscapes through the depth of our personal experiences and histories. So I shared a lot about my personal stories within the PhD and within pieces I've done. But towards the end, I've became quite frustrated, because the question is, do people care and do they want to know your story, or especially if you come from the other place? And I also thought a lot about displacement, and I think when you are just dropped to another place, and if you don't speak language, you will feel a little bit like silencer. You might feel a bit afraid to engage with things, or you wouldn't know what the reactions of people are, or maybe how to read them even, because there is huge cultural diversity of the world. So there is all of that, I think, that we can talk about. And then, of course, it's the absorbance of noise, and maybe making the world a little bit quieter and creating the space for quieter voices, or voices coming from elsewhere. And then, interesting moment in London was at some point, business-looking gentleman, like in a suit, he saw me at near his bus stop, and he approached me, and he just kept asking me, it's like, what is this? What is this? And I would just gesture as like, I don't know, doesn't care, whatever, moving my arms, and he became more and more frustrated. And then he shouted, so I could hear it, this can just happen in London. That's what he said. This can just happen in London. So here we go, artist from Sarajevo, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and most people have no idea where it is in the world, and currently based in Aberdeen in Scotland, doing research, comes to London to perform a piece that can only happen in London. And that kind of shows a lot about what are our expectations from people and different places, that we can kind of open up and problematize.
Yeah, I actually, funnily enough, noticed in one of the social media posts of Silencer in Aberdeen that someone commented, only in Aberdeen. So it seems that there's this kind of idea that whichever place that you're in is unique and has this, maybe Silencer just kind of embodies whatever place it goes to or something. I don't know, but that was really interesting to see.
Yeah, it is. And I suppose, people just try to understand it through any popular context or reference, as you mentioned. So in Aberdeen, it was snowing on a day when I did it. So I suspect a lot of comments related to the snowsuit and being warm in it and things like that. But also one of the comments said the beast from the east, but that was the name of the storm at the time. And obviously I'm coming from Southeastern Europe, so I thought that's quite fun.
That is funny, yeah. I like the idea of the Silencer being the beast from the east.
unsettling side of silencer. Even name connotates, silencer as a part of the weapon that silences things. I think it links to some other works I've done, living through Sarajevo siege and Bosnian War in 1990s. So I welcome various reactions, although it at the time is not easy to deal with. And that's why I find this recording from Corby, documentation from Corby, most interesting that I've done so far with silencer.
Yeah. It was really, again, it was just an aspect of the work that I hadn't thought about or encountered before. So it really made me quite emotional. I'm not sure why that was, especially that moment when we hear you speak, that just really struck a chord with me.
It's interesting. Again, thinking about accents as well, and local accents and kind of more upper class, middle class accents that we found in theater. And people kind of asking permission, although they know I don't hear, and then they apologize. I know you don't hear. It's just being used to asking for permission and kind of setting the terrain for these photos or for the engagement. So the theater was also it's really interesting contrast to the street. So the difference between generally non-art audience and art audience. And then also like outdoors, you will have people that maybe have experience with the theater or different art forms, or they're curious about the structure of the suit and they intuitively understand that I'm here to engage, and that they can also welcome and learn something from it. Whatever they can gain in that moment is that just touching, that's fine. It's like in London, I felt at some point I was crossing the street that someone gently put a hand on me because they were very curious, and that was fine. Because people get that. That's kind of very, I think that's really interesting. But that difference between art and non-art audiences really comes through because of theater, and I didn't have that in other places. So it is because of James' vision. So I suppose what's just important to say is that it is chronological approach to editing, and I've decided to use some of the interesting sounds that I found interesting in this mix. There are some parts that are a bit slower, that there are not so many things happening, and I've kept it just to kind of indicate what was the pace of the walk, and that there were times where people were not engaging. So I walked between the two parks in Corby, and that is really quite a long stretch of road where there are just cars passing by next to you. I also explored the parks inside, but most of the sounds I recorded were again cars, because our sonic pollution is so saturated. Our cities and towns are so saturated with sonic pollution, with sounds of these vehicles, that it's very difficult to capture anything else. And as a field recordist, I often use some specialized microphones, and when I recorded for that purpose, I focus on particular range of sounds, particular locations, and things like that. This is very different in the sense that the microphones are hidden in a hood of the suit, and sounds recorded are pretty accidental, or they represent a document of the sounds that actually silencer missed, and some of interactions with people. I do sometimes feel a little bit bad that I don't ask for permission from people that are interacting for me to use these recordings. But I suppose everything is anonymous, and I don't find anything really sensitive in there. If I would probably take it out. So those are some ethical considerations. But yeah, it was just about what sounds interesting to me, what I thought could be interesting for a listener, and having certain dynamic and the pace, and also things get a bit intense from time to time, and that's why I've introduced these chapters. So just for a bit of respite and almost to kind of remind a listener that is listening to sound piece. And it is about silencer, and kind of reminding that it's a human factor recording. It's so it was, I had to kind of find a way what to do with it. And I just, very beginning and very end, there are a few distorted sounds that are reversed and that I included. And I was considering making more abstract sound piece altogether, but then listening to whole documentation, realized that actually documentation, at least for me, it's very interesting the way it is. And these more distorted sounds are there to almost, they're like a metaphor of me going into a performance. So they appear only at the beginning and towards the end in the cube. So yeah, that's kind of in terms of the sound piece.
And there's this moment in the elevator. Is it in an elevator with a woman?
Yes.
I really like when she says, "It's better that you can't hear." What a character.
Yeah, I couldn't hear anything she said. So I laughed a lot while listening to the recording, and yeah, that was a good moment. Yeah, I hope that people of Corby will be able to identify maybe some of the locations, or think about what were the possible locations that silencer experienced. And the interesting aspect about sound is really actually imaginative. And it promotes fiction, it promotes imagination, and helps recollection of memories of. So you might, all of this can help you recall certain situations in your life or experiences in childhood or teenage years. And I'm aware that the recording can be really triggering, especially for school teachers. I thought a lot about my sister, who's used to teach in secondary school. And she used to tell me about teenagers, and especially like groups of them, and shouting. And I think she's really triggered by it, even still, like even after years of teaching, she still is quite sensitive to that sound. She loves kids, but it's very specific. So I need to give her the recording to listen and warn her on these things.
Yeah, the intensity in those moments, and then the softness in other moments. It's just really, it's a kind of lulls you into the world for sure. The world of silencer.
Thank you. Yeah. I hope people will be able to close their eyes and just relax and to listen and enjoy the journey. And I would really love to thank to everyone who took part in the sound walk that morning. I got some sound recordings of sound walk as well, but I felt it would be probably too much to talk about the both within the podcast. So thank you for your generosity, your time. And I hope you're still listening to your environments. You're now converted.
You can find more from Maja at her website, majazećo.com. That's majazeco.com. Accompanying images for this episode are at our website. There will be links to all of this in the episode description, as always. Listeners on Spotify are also able to experience an accompanying video to this episode by artist Sapphire Goss, and for listeners on other platforms, you can find Sapphire's work on our website. All of this will also, of course, be included in the episode description. Sapphire Goss is a multidisciplinary artist who works with moving image photography and other lens-based methods. Using obsolete technologies, she creates chimerical imagery using unexpected materials, looping and processing to make an analog uncanny, resulting in grainy, shimmering, and otherworldly bursts of light and emotion, both moving and mysterious. A wonderful accompaniment to this audio work. This episode has been edited by Astrid Bjorklund, the other half of Subterra. Thank you for listening to the Fermynwoods Contemporary Art Podcast. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to positively rate, review, and subscribe on your podcatcher. It helps other people find the podcast, and it makes us feel good about ourselves. This episode series is part of Xylophobia, Fermynwoods Contemporary Art's new 2-year programme funded by Arts Council England. Visit fermynwoods.org for more information on our programme and to sign up to our monthly email newsletter. Follow us at Fermynwoods on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to check out Subterra at Subterrestrials on Instagram. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you back here soon.